I'm off to pollinate some vanilla today. I missed 2 days, but it's just at the starting of the curve, and initially only a couple of flowers blossom. So I anticipate about 5 to 6 flowers today, and that still is quite early in its blossoming season, so it shouldn't be too costly. But vanilla requires manual pollination, so an optimal pollination strategy is essential. Last year I did this study, which you can check out on my GitHub link. But right now I'm walking towards the So these are the lines along which the vines are planted. That is a vanilla vine, and we also have some pepper vines. So this is how a pepper vine looks, and that's a vanilla vine. The way I go about pollinating these flowers is I go through the plantation in an orderly manner. So this is the first column. If you notice, it's a column of trees, and you have an assortment of trees. There is the silver oak. This is silver oak, the first one. The second one is something called a manjum, and you'll find some arecanut trees as well, the ones which have palmy leaves. So these are typical trees that you would have in a plantation in Coorg. What I do is I go along the center of these two columns, and every column I encounter, I give it a location code and quantify data like how many new flowers are there and things like that. So this is the first column and this is the second column. As you can see, all the trees don't have vanilla vines yet, but ideally that should be done. I need to plant some new cuttings near the tree. And the way it's planted is the vanilla vines are planted close to the tree stump, and they're kind of guided along the tree, and after they get a grip they just keep climbing high like so. Oh, you can see some ants doing some construction activities. Is that on frame? Where are they? Yeah, here they are. Okay, so it climbs up, and then after it climbs up to a certain point, they need to be brought down like so. This can be done by tying this irrigation pipe, or really anything which forms a kind of a T over which you can hang the vanilla vines. And now I've just come down the first and the second column, and now I'm going to move on to the third column. So this third column is a little irregular. So I'm considering this whole section between these two trenches as the third column. And like I mentioned, every location of the vine is coded based on the column and the type of tree and where it occurs in the tree column. Like, let's say this is the second silver oak, so it'll have like a third column 3 star 2 G. G is grevillea, which is kind of like a technical name for silver oak, and it's easy to keep track because I don't confuse it with stump, which is also an S. Yeah. I've arrived at my first flower for the day. This is in the third column, and I've coded it as 3 star 7G, which means it's on the 7th grevillea tree along this column. But I will need to change that because I'll need to keep track of 7 grevillea trees along this column to finally understand that that's the location. Instead, what you can do is code it as per some other tree which has lesser number of trees you need to go through to arrive at that location. So I'm going to choose the adka, which is the areca nut. You can see the palmy leaves. That's tree number 1 along this column, and this is tree number 2 along that column. So I'll put that as 3 star 2A and G. Third column, second adka grevillea, which is silver oak. And as you can see, this flowering point, that cluster wherein the flowers are blossoming from, I call that a point. It may not be technical, but it helps to keep track that that's what I'm talking about. So that's one flowering point. This vine has that, that was the first one. This is number 2, 3, and so on. And you'll notice that there's a lot of ants on this vine, which I'll need to try to take care of, because once they start building a small little hive there, the buds no longer blossom. And also need to be careful to not spend too much time standing here, because they'll send the troop to climb me and give me some biting. So let me try to explain how the pollination process is. You see, this is the vanilla orchid. It's got 2 flaps along the inside column. The lower flap is where the pollen needs to enter. The pollen is in the upper flap, which is that yeah, now it's focused, which is that flap which has the yellow pollen in it. So I'm going to use a tool, which is, the tool for today is this little stick. I'm going to use this tool to cut the side of the petal of that, well, I guess that column, of the outside column, and then lift the inner flap, and in the same motion lift the upper flap, which has the pollen, and close the pollen flap over the lower flap. Okay, so I'm going to try to take care of the ants. I'm using this this pesticide. I mean, it's fairly mild, but it's the go-to pesticide. They call it Gemaxin here in Coorg. It's a popular powdered form which they use to take care of ants on coffee trees, the ant hives. So what they do is they tie it, they put it into a sock, as I've done here, tie it onto a stick, and then you kind of just do that so that it spills the powder out. I'm gonna see how this plays out. This is my first time doing this, so let's hope the ants move away. Here goes nothing. They do seem to be running away, but let's see. Let me do it for this whole vine. Okay, that's where it is. Just lightly. Okay, so after that dusting session, the ants still seem to be quite at home, but maybe it takes a while to act. Generally, when they use it on the coffee hives, they leave it, they put the Gemaxin powder, and they pick the coffee from that tree the next day. So maybe by tomorrow this should be better, but I just dusted it. What they do on the coffee plants is sometimes they just directly spill it from the bag of powder. They just spill a concentrated thing into the hive, and everything goes away. But here there's no hive, so I mean, but I've dusted it on the vine. Let's see how that plays out by sometime later or even tomorrow. But this is how the flower looks once it's pollinated. I have a cut on the side, and then the insides are fairly preserved. It's not damaged. Alright, so there's some good news. The ants seem to have disappeared. As you can see, I guess they get poisoned, and it takes a while for that poison to kick in, but they do seem to be dying away. And I don't see any more ants on the vine, although they have come to the ground now, and they're probably gonna die around there. Poor ants, but have to do what I gotta do. Okay, we have a double here, and you'll also notice there's a different kind of ant. It's a smaller variety, and these are the ones which I've noticed to build a small hive right at the tip of this budding point, and then the buds don't develop after that. So yeah, there's a couple of different types of ants which attack these vanilla vines, and some are more destructive than the others. These smaller ones tend to be more destructive, as I've seen. The other ones, the red ones, maybe after a point they start eating the flowers, and then once they get a taste for it, maybe. But yeah, so the method of control is going to be the same for all these insects. Cut the side. Try to keep my index finger at the back so that once I lift the inner flap, I can just delicately do that. And I'm trying not to spend too much time as well, because the more time you spend, the more likely you are to damage the inside part. So you might expect diminishing returns on your work. So try to just make it quick and without thinking too much about it. Just hoping for the best. I just saw Mrs. Bluey, this crazy dog here, picking up something which looked like a skull. I don't know what kind of skull it is. Yikes, it looks fresh. Pop. Pop. Looks like it's a dog or some kind of animal. Yikes. Louis seems pretty thrilled with her find. Crazy. This is what a vanilla starts to look like. These are unsuccessful pollinations because the flowers fallen off and only the stem remains. Here what happens is, like, the flower would have been here at the tip. On pollination, that stem part starts swelling up, which becomes the vanilla pod here. But also this vanilla pod seems to be eaten at the edges. It seems to be eaten at the edges. It could be the spider which has fossilized. I don't know. But yeah, that's what it starts to look like. Closer to afternoon, the flowers start closing up like this, which makes it difficult to pollinate. So ideally you want to finish your pollination before noon. There were a total of about 10 flowers today, and so yeah, it's still at the starting end of the blossoming season. In the peaks, I estimated to reach about 30 or 40. Last year's peak had about 20 to 30 flowers at max. This year, because there's more flowering points and flowering locations, I would see that rise up to 30 to 40. And missing one of those peak days can be costly because you're losing out on so many potential pollination opportunities. I'm going to finish off now with a quick wood cutting workout, and also it'll help to clean up this mess. This tree has fallen down for a couple of years now, and I'm gonna chop it. I just sharpened the axe a bit using a file, so I'm also excited to see how that plays out, how it cuts. So my fingers are kind of paining after that. Mainly I guess the tendons responsible for the gripping action. That's what is sore right now. And I think I'm just going to stretch it out a bit and then start again. Whew. Ah.